how long can you go on making rich people 1 or 2% richer or 1 or 2% poorer? There came a time when I looked back and I said, but what have I really done? And all my life, my identity was head of private banking.
Do you think that your identity was so interconnected with the title that you had?
A large part of our time spent in work, right? And that work identity tends to subsume a lot of our other identities.
Yeah.
How do you take key decisions and how do you make that process of taking key decisions more robust? There's only one thing I know, which is reflective and reflexive thinking. So reflexive is everybody's running in this direction. I was trying to go in the other. I instinctively run in this.
Yeah.
Reflective is, I'm thinking of doing this and I have already done that. What do you think? While they're approaching you, they've almost made up their minds. Psychologists, a renowned one, use the term delayed intuition, which is write down your pros, write down your cons.
Yeah.
After that, take a more informed view, and that informed view is what he calls delayed intuition. It's still your own point of view.
Yeah. Did you apply this principle when you decided to get off the corporate treadmill? Let's talk about gender bias a little bit.
People don't associate a money management role with a woman. There's a very strong occupational bias. For instance, if I now look back, there have been instances when there were, even within in a client's office or in the organizations that I've been, somebody has said something sexist, and I think in some instances I have shrugged my shoulders, right? Today, I would call it out.
Today on the Aditi Govitrikar Show, we have Sutapa Banerjee, someone who has lived inside wealth, boardrooms, leadership, and reinvention. She built major wealth management businesses, then stepped away from the corporate treadmill and began looking closely at how people make decisions, how power shapes judgment, and how women are seen in rooms where decisions are made. Sutapa, before we get into your latest book, what do you mean by behavioral insights?
So, Aditi, let me start by giving a really relatable example, because that's the best way to actually, for anybody, for the uninitiated, to understand this. So let's say I'm actually walking out of this room and I wanted to turn right for whatever reason. And I see a whole bunch of people running in the opposite direction. Without thinking, I would instinctively run with them, right? You study psychology. So this is really the herding instinct, right? So we have this herding instinct, which is automatic. You don't need to think, you instinctively do it, right?
Yeah.
But another name for it is also conformity bias,
Yes.
right? We love to conform. And this is not a bad bias, because it's what's kept us alive. That's how we negotiate the world. It's there from evolutionary times. But it's the same person with the same brain who's walking into a boardroom or is walking into a conference room and taking decisions on investment, on a new product, on a merger or an acquisition, all of these things, right? With a brain which is wired to conform, right? Now, you may shout from the rooftops and say that I want independent views, I want independent opinions. You need a couple of things for that to happen. Number one, you need people who genuinely have diverse perspectives, right? So the way a lawyer would look at a problem would be different from the way a marketing person would look at a problem, would be very different from the way an academic would look at a problem, etc., right? The assumptions that we come with, the way we look at a problem, the way we analyze, all differ based on where we come from, including past experiences. So that's one of the reasons why you should have a diversity of views. But it's also not that you just need to have diversity of views. You need to let that thrive. Because otherwise you'll have social dominance, organizational hierarchy. You will toe the line, because that's how we are made, right? So there are also ways of how, if you can't rewire what's in the brain, you change the environment and you legitimize sometimes dissent or disagreement, because that's healthy. You need a bunch of independent views to be able to take a decision more robustly. So that's just one of the tenets of the subject called behavioral economics, from which you derive insights. And this subject is primarily all about how how do you take key decisions, and how do you make that process of taking key decisions more robust. And I just mentioned one of the ways. There are people doing it, and they are, Richard Thaler, and there are a bunch of people who won the Nobel Prize for Economics who've put it into use in different ways. A number of countries, Obama had his behavioral insights team use it for both policy. Some of the more evolved businesses use it in how they make decisions. So India, I thought there was a crying need to bring this subject upfront, both for business decision making as well as for policy experts and domain experts. So it's about what will create the compelling motive that would actually propel businesses to move in the direction where they weave in sustainable practices into the way they do their business. The idea of equal participation economically, either in that same business or overall in society, happens by use of smart tools and techniques where some of the cognitive biases don't come into the picture. You learn the practices in Indian context mostly, and also I've had some international examples of what has worked and why those worked. And then try to apply that at scale, either in those sectors or across sectors, across problems. So all of that is what the book really examines and explores.
What would you say on a granular level a reader can hope to take away by reading this?
So what I think would be really sort of worthwhile is to understand. See, as I said, the book works at many levels. So at a very basic level for any lay reader who say works, what you get is ideas which you can yourself maybe put to action. As a team leader, as somebody who's contributing to a business in a certain way, all of us have the power to do some shifts, some bigger shifts, some smaller shifts. So that's one. So you need to understand how to be able to really make that shift, right? And like I gave the example of sustainability practitioners, the same works in the, works for people who are working in the space of inclusion. So how do you make inclusion woven into the fabric of a business rather than it remaining peripheral? You'll very often find that there is a diversity champion or a diversity officer in a business, right? While the rest of business continues. Just like a business will succeed in having a diverse set of people, and by that I only don't mean gender diversity. Occupational diversity, the whole works, including gender. Its identity is important, right? You will only have it if it's woven into the fabric of the business, starting from the top, from the founder or the CEO, and going downwards.
Got it. And suppose a business leader has to read this book. What is that one takeaway that you wish they change in the way they run the business?
So one of the things would be to look at the process of making decisions. How do you make decisions? Who are the people involved in taking that decision? How much data have you collected before you took that decision? There's a word called adversarial collaboration in academic parlance in behavioral economics, which is basically about, I have a certain point of view. What if instead of believing that point of view, I have it, so it means obviously I hold it, and there is some data which backs me up. But can I go and search for data which says the opposite? Think the opposite, right? Somebody who believes exactly the opposite, and look for data in that direction. And then, see, the reason is we all ultimately need to take decisions, certainly businesses. And the information that you have is imperfect. You will never have perfect information, right? So there's always a chance, and it's all a probability. There's a chance you would like to increase the probability of success, lower the chance of failure, right? But you will never know for sure, particularly in an environment where things are changing all the time in terms of geopolitics. We've gone through COVID. We know there are unknown unknowns, right? So in that whole scenario, what is the best way of taking a decision? What is the best process of taking a decision? And many times when you have views which are to the contrary, and which is what I just explained, that you have what I call, you almost collaborate with your adversary. So somebody who has a different point of view, what it makes you do is build guardrails. So if I take a simple example that it's not simple, it's a big one, it's a big size decision, that you're going in for an acquisition, right? You're going in for an acquisition because you believe it'll be adding value to the company, right? But what if it didn't? What if it went wrong? Can you assume now today, so this technique is called pre-mortem, you do a post-mortem after the patient has died. Pre-mortem means you assume that that the patient is going to die. In this instance, you assume that the acquisition has gone wrong. What would you, if you imagine that scenario 2 years down the line, what are the steps, looking at that same data that's in front of you, you would do today, right? It also, in a, say, senior leadership team or in a boardroom, it legitimizes dissent. It makes you think the opposite with the same set of data. And what you do, you may still go ahead with it, but what you do, to me, is the most important thing. You build guardrails. You build plan A, plan B, plan C. If this were to go wrong, this is what I would do. If this were to go wrong, this is what I would do. If this were to go wrong, this is what I would do. So you go with your eyes open that these things could go wrong. There could be cost overruns. There could be time overruns. This set of people may not accept what we are trying to do, and you proactively address those.
So nothing is swept under the carpet.
Nothing is swept, and your probability of success, probability of making it happen, improves.
So look at it in a kind of a stoic manner and address it very, very dispassionately.
Absolutely. Okay. Which is, see, all of behavioral economics is just that we think we are being objective. We use our brain as the measuring rod. The brain does not like doing that. It's a shortcut. It likes to jump to conclusions. It's a jumping to conclusion machine.
Heuristics, right?
Heuristics, as absolutely right. Word, that's the word for it, and that keeps us going. That's how. I mean, if we did. So, which is why I keep using the word key decisions and consequential decisions. If we tried to apply the technique that I just mentioned to simple things like picking up, we'll be analyzing, paralyzing all our lives, right? So the idea is to take key decisions and use these techniques, because consequential decisions, which are difficult to reverse, because then when you apply those techniques there, your probability of success, building guardrails, actually being what you said, being a stoic, being objective, improves your guardrails.
But I think this concept can very well be applied to life as well. I mean, not only businesses. It would make, I think all of us will make fewer mistakes.
I think so. You can actually take a social norm and upend that social norm, right? In a group situation. Individually, it means there's only one thing I know, which is, and I try to apply it myself, which is what I call, the difference between reflective and reflexive thinking. So reflexive is like the example I told you. Everybody's running in this direction. I was trying to go in the other. I instinctively run in this. Right? So that's reflex action. Reflective is for any decision which is like, I need to take a call for, say, somebody who's wanting to make a career move. Most people, I'm sometimes approached now that I'm at my current age that, I'm thinking of doing this and I have already done that. What do you think? And I find that while they're approaching you, they've almost made up their minds. And one of the first things I say is, have you sort of written down what are the pros, what are the cons, give it a weightage, treat it almost like a mathematical problem, right? Because the things, if you are, and this is this whole thing between gut feel and taking a deliberate decision, right? And you have a lot of practitioners of gut feel. So here what I'm speaking is directly against it. There are areas where that could be important, right? But it has to be exactly what has worked for you in the past. But if the circumstances of your current decision, a decision that you want to take or I want to take, the circumstances around it are different, then gut feel is essentially what's got wired into your brain and is your first filter.
It's
That's
what you know. It never takes into account what you don't know.
Absolutely.
And there's so much more that we don't know than we know, right?
Absolutely. So and it's also what has worked. It can be misleading. And it's what has worked for me in the past. See, experience, people say, there's a cliche and almost idiomatic that experience is what teaches us what we know, right? But it's your specific experience only in your specific circumstances. The circumstances today that you yourself might be facing might be completely different. right?
Yeah.
But your default filter, your default in the brain is exactly what has
Yeah.
worked for you in the past,
True.
right? And the only way you can get out of it is by reflecting. Pause, reflect, right? So gut feel, another word for it is intuition. So
Yeah.
Daniel Kahneman, and that itself is a telling comment. He's a psychologist, a renowned one,
Yeah.
who won the Nobel Prize for economics in 2002. And he used the term delayed intuition, which is, sure, you have an intuition, write it down, but look at the data and the problem all over again. Write down your pros, write down your cons.
Yeah.
After that, take a more informed view. And that informed view is what he calls delayed intuition. It's still your own point of view.
Yeah.
But that point of view has now been informed by a lot of data,
Yeah.
a lot of things which you weighed
Yeah.
in the manner in which it ought to be weighted, like
Yeah.
we do with a business problem.
Yeah.
We don't do it in our own lives, right?
But we should.
And we should.
That's so crucial, because I think psychologically speaking, what comes to my mind is this, that when we talk about intuition or, gut feel, it has more to do with your emotional brain, which works on your emotions. And that is pretty much related to your experiences or your understanding of the world around.
Absolutely.
Whereas delayed decision making or delayed intuition is where you create a gap between the emotional part of your brain and your frontal cortex, which is your judgmental and analytical brain.
Absolutely right.
Which then takes into account data. So I think it is beautifully put. I think
absolutely.
That's
which is why the book is called Thinking Fast and Thinking Slow, right?
Yes.
So thinking fast is what the brain is wired to do, because the brain wants to save energy.
Yeah.
It wants to move on to the next task, right?
Yeah.
Hence the heuristics, right? Yeah. And only if you pause and say, I'm not going to decide now. Again, key decisions in our lives, not simple decisions. If you do that, are you allowing yourself time to look at other data and deliberately? And that's where sounding boards, mentors for people who are trying to take career decisions, looking at other people, people who've done things differently. You may not choose to do what they've done. You may choose to do something else, right? But that point of view is extremely important.
That is true. Did you apply this principle? Because for me, I would say a delayed bloomer, so to say. So I learned this much later in life, and I wish I knew it when I was much younger. Did you apply this principle when you decided to get off the corporate treadmill? Or did this knowledge come to you later?
That's an interesting question. I'm having to think and go back. So I quit full-time work in 2013. I think, I'd done financial services in 2 financial banks and 1 boutique bank for almost 24 years. I was running money management for managing monies for rich people. That was what I was doing in, I think, almost 12, 13 out of those 24 years. So I think in my case, it was looking for meaning, because I thought, how long can you go on making rich people 1 or 2% richer or 1 or 2% poorer? All this thing of setting up a new business from scratch. Finally, and I got, I had a reasonably decent trajectory in my corporate career and all of that. But when I really looked back, there came a time when I looked back and I said, but what have I really done? And I was like almost bored doing what I was doing. And it comes at a time when you've kind of got your successes, and then a lot of people can continue. But I I'm a very high energy person. And I was like, every day seemed like a repeat of
monotonous.
Previous day without something. I mean, there are challenges, but the challenges seem to me all of the same kind. So things will change. There will be some newer challenges, but I was bored. So it was boredom which drove me.
Also, I think existential questioning, right? That's what
I needed to also find meaning.
The ikigai.
And, it was, money management meant financial planning, right? So it was also, I came from a middle-class background, so I didn't need to have, 6 houses and 6 cars. I had my concept of enough. So I thought, okay, so now if I think I have my concept of enough, you're never sure. Then what else can I do where, which is interesting, which I can put my energy to use, but it's something interesting. And I didn't know.
So you mentioned enough. I had enough. Was it a preconceived or a pre-planned idea that you had that, okay, this is what it means to have enough? When you start your career, at that time, we always have these stars in our eyes, and we say that, I want to do this, I want to do this. And if I achieve this, it will be enough for me.
I don't think when I started my career, I had an end point of enough, but I didn't do it, thinking that I would reach this level of financial security and I would do it. I don't think it happened quite that way. I think the boredom came first, which made me assess where I was. And even with that boredom, I continued for a period of almost 1.5 years. The other important question which then came to my head, even when I assumed, thanks to a middle class background, that I think I have enough. I mean, what's the worst case scenario that can happen? And all of that went into my head. So that last 1 year, I made sure, in a typical foreign bank, you're always in a leased accommodation because it's given to you. You don't really own any assets, right? You're just moving and the bank provides everything. So it made me, so I, bought my house, took a club membership, all of the things that I kind of thought I needed.
Which you consider are
important. Right? Did my own financial planning. I have only one daughter. So I just did all of that. And I felt like, I think I can sort of, go ahead and,
Did it feel risky?
So financially, you are never 100% sure, but I thought...
No, not only financially. I mean, emotionally also.
Oh, absolutely. And that's what I was coming to. Certainly. In fact, for that entire 1.5 years, while I was quite sure that I actually was not enjoying what I was doing, it took me almost close to, I think, between 15 and 18 months to take that decision. And there are parts of that period I remember very vividly. One was, I'll share with you, is this whole thing which I went through that, all my life, my identity, my working life, my identity was, and at that time visiting cards were not obsoleted. I, by the way, still carry mine. So it was literally like, head of private banking, ABN AMRO, right? Or whatever it was, CEO Private Wealth. So it's like, people will ask you when you go to, and I don't know why, to me in retrospect, that seems like not the most consequential of questions, but it bugged me and bothered me at that time. So when I walk into a gathering and people ask, what do you do? What would I say? To the extent that somebody, who was a friend who would actually run programs for me, who's an HR consultant who actually came and ran these very nice unstructured programs for me in 2 of my organizations. And she happened to drop by. And then I contacted her and we had this chat outside and said, this is my thought process. She said, yeah, so that's great. So what's stopping you? You just told me that financially you seem to be okay and this is okay. And then why would you not sort of look out and discover? And I said, exactly the question that I just asked you. I said, what would I say? So she looked at me and said, but that's, you can just say, you're writing a book, you're taking a break. So I said, no, I'm not writing a book and I'm not taking a break. And, that's not true. So it was basically wanting to answer the question also to myself. It's not really what you want to answer to the external world. It's also what you want
for
to
yourself.
answer yourself, to know what you're doing.
So at that point, would you think that your identity was so interconnected with the title that you had, that dissociating from that was the biggest barrier to do what you wanted to do?
Unfortunately, while I did not realize it, and this is, I've seen after this, now I can sort of look at that dispassionately, and I can see that also in a lot of people, whether you like it or not, a large part of our time is spent in work, right? And that work identity tends to subsume a lot of our other identities.
Yes.
It's not that I did not have other identities. Obviously, I mean, particularly women, and I, hopefully men too, but sometimes women have, when I was doing my coaching, you have your work and you have your family.
Yeah.
But to me, I also had a whole lot of other interests. I'm actually an intersection of many things. So I, run my own book club. I have my film club. So I'm interested in a whole bunch of things, from art to architecture to many things, right? I'm into my whole life even today. I tell people fitness is my most important thing. It's the biggest actually stress buster for me, and I have enough stressors. And the rest of my life fits in around it. So my book, my big problem, which I was telling you, is this screen time that I'm spending, which I'm not used to. So in any case, going back to the whole question of identity, whether one liked it or not, it became a large part. And the fact that at that time, that was something that bothered me, right? When I sorted out the financial stuff, the next thing that bothered me
was who am I?
Yeah. And it was both a question to the external world as well as a question to myself. So it took me a while to accept that. And that's what happened. But once I took that plunge, and I really sort of, want to talk about that, that whole process of discovery was very different even from the person I was before. Because the person I was before is very clear. I was a very driven person all through my work life. Some of my ex-bosses say that I'm driven even today, which is, I want to get there. This is where my business is. I'm starting from zero. In 3 to 4 years' time, we have to get there come what may. Right? There's no getting away from it. So I was like that driven. So from that person who I thought I was to actually enjoy going with the flow, which is today my life. I mean, these are all my little adventures, as I call myself, right? The teaching. Who would have thought I would have liked to teach? I didn't even imagine it. Who would have thought I'd write a book? It wasn't really in the realm of my imagination 5 years ago. So, so we all think that we are of a particular type, but it is so situational, and there's so much of discovery that you can do if you let go of some of those things which you think you are. And it's not always been all good. I mean, during that time of transition, when I was still sort of going with the flow and not very sure of what, so I had also a very structured day to coming to a very unstructured day each day. So if something did not happen, which was interesting that day, the questions would be, why did I do that? I mean, I would be like really driven and all charged up when I was working. But today, I did nothing productive. I mean, what's the big deal? I mean, who am I trying to prove something to? What am I trying to prove to? So those questions came up in the initial years, once in a while. Right? But the moment but to me, the biggest and the most liberating feeling was that each day is different from the previous day. There may be a day of phenomenal activity, and there may be a day where I will laze in bed and do really not much except read a book. So the ability to feel the luxury of time. So to me, what I value today the most is time, because it's the most finite resource, the most precious resource. And if I own my time, I don't own all of it, but I own a significant part of it.
Were you always a high-performing individual? Like as a kid? And I ask this because I have been as a child, and I've shared this earlier with somebody else also, that the motivation always comes from within me. I don't need external inspiration. In fact, people tell me that, how much are you doing? How many things are you going to... And to that, my answer is, I love doing it. Why are you asking me? So were you always a high-performing individual, or how were you as a kid?
So as a kid, exactly the opposite, probably. So I had an elder sibling, a sister, and my sister would always come first in school. Okay. And I was like one of those who was kind of a happy-go-lucky kind of a kid. Luckily, unlike a lot of parents that I see who do a lot of comparison, so my mom actually taught kindergarten and she taught children. So she specialized in child psychology for her generation. And she was, a child needs to be right? No pressures, no whatever. So she did all of that, and we would go for prize distribution. I would actually go because she's won all the prizes. So I was 3 years junior too. I didn't win any prizes. But I was very happy. She would get a whole bunch of books. So the really large books with lots of pictures would come to me. And I thought it was a fantastic arrangement. She would win the prizes. I would get to read the books. Yeah, I thought it was really good. And zero pressure at home. Till one day, I think there was some teacher who picked up and that happened to be, so, I was in school where you got ranks at that time, first, second, third.
Yeah, of course.
So, and it so happened, I think by luck more than anything else, I happened to have come either fifth or sixth, I don't remember what. So I was very pleased. I had a very smug expression. I was carrying my report card home, and she said, so you're Shuchandra's sister? I said, yeah, let me see your report card. She took it, and then she made a face and said, you don't come first like your sister, and gave it back. It was the first time I felt compared.
The realization.
Yeah. I mean, I went home with a very long face, and my mother was like, you've got a rank. I mean, maybe I got a rank for the first time. So she was like, really thrilled. And I said, this is what the teacher told me. And she was very upset. And I think that was when this whole thing came to me, more out of curiosity that, okay, so let me figure what it means to do well in school. So that was the first time, right? It took me a few years till I achieved that. And then I thought it was no big deal, whatever. But as I moved on, there were ambitions of different kinds, I guess. So in a middle class kind of a setup that we grew up in, though both my parents worked, I was very clear that I wanted to live life on my own terms. So, I went to a business school. Even though...
Sorry, I'm going to stop you here. What do you mean by live my life on my own terms? What did that mean to you at that time?
So, typically coming from upper middle class homes, there was, what I saw still around me were, girls my age or who had sort of a more advanced in age than me, who studied, did whatever, and then went with what their parents said and studied either a subject that their parents told them to, or they got married when they were told that you've reached this particular age, whether they did it by choosing somebody themselves or somebody was chosen by their parents, but they followed a very set path. So one of the things which I kind of in my mind decided, and probably to a certain degree, you also learn by looking at some people around you who you are close to. In my case, it was also my sister, and maybe a set of friends that she had who were, that 3 years older than me, was that, whatever it is that I choose to do, I had no idea what it is that I wanted, but I must make my decisions myself. That came at a fairly young age.
And your parents supported it as well, right? I mean, from what you shared, they were very open to letting you do and be.
Absolutely.
Which
So
is
that
a great
happened,
thing.
From a young age.
That's amazing.
With no pressure. That I think that was very liberating, and which I've tried to practice for my daughter as well. So I remember when I was in my private banking days, who my relationship manager, I was the head of the business and we were going out to meet a client. So it's obviously a client who's very moneyed. And she was like, Sutapa, you can't take out your phone. I said, but I will love to take out my big fat phone because, just as a badge of honor. So those were some of the fun things I kind of remember, but that also kind of frees you. So that very strong acquisitive instinct that I need to acquire so much was not there. Otherwise, I don't care what brand of car I'm driving, or which are all liberating because, it frees you from...
The shackles of, possession or possessing is quite heavy. It could get
and what people think of you.
Yeah.
See, that's a huge thing that people have, that if I drive in this car or if I don't carry this bag, what will people think of me?
Yeah.
And that, as you become comfortable in your own skin, and that probably happens over time, that is one thing which I find very liberating.
So you said that, having a car or a phone or that did not bother you. And from what you shared, the big fat phone, that means it was a few years back because we had big fat phones a while back. Yet you're an extremely successful person, and at a time where it was a male-dominated field. What was it that pushed you?
Okay, so that I think was more this whole thing of, I guess, you have one or two of these drivers. So for me, it was not possessions or in that sense the wealth. I mean, I'm at all not glamorizing. I needed to have my comforts and my experiences, learn enough for that, but not earn more to be at par with another person, right? So there the driver, I think, was recognition that this person built this business from scratch to here. So within the organization or in a broader sphere, as you keep getting, sort of up the ranks, that whole recognition and the fact that, professionally this person is an achiever, knows how to run businesses, is a business leader. I thought that was
what
the
excited
motivation. But it was again less external affirmation. I just liked that whole feeling that, I took something from zero and I'm taking it here. Nothing existed and I brought it to this level. But I guess we want recognition in other areas, right? Now that I've written a book, I'd like the book to be liked by people. But it's also both internal and a little bit of external, I think. Internally, I'd like to feel that I've done this. So, I took this subject when I did not really know it. I've learned it in the last, 13, 14 years or 12 to 13 years. And now, I'm able to spread the knowledge to a bunch of people who would otherwise not know it. And that gives me a lot of internal satisfaction.
What about validation?
So some of it, I guess, from the people who matter, right? So people, for instance, I would be very pleased if, there are a set of people who kind of also understand the subject. So it's even at a very smaller level when those people said that, I read the book. So even when I was starting to write the book, my own chapter, I sent to about 3 or 4 people whose opinions matter.
No, I only ask a question because in today's day and age with the social media explosion, one is seeking validation from strangers or people who don't even, they are not in your circle kind of a thing, from different spheres of life, etc. We seek validation, so to say, from anybody and everybody. That's why I asked you the question.
So it's the exact opposite. I mean, I just
you're
think
not
I'm lucky.
gone in that zone.
Actually, that's the other thing. I just realized that, except LinkedIn, I'm not on any social media. So I said I'd have to create accounts to be able to be on any of this. Yeah. So that's been absent. And I think, and because of that, I think that itself is also very liberating. So that allows me to lead a very stress-free kind of a life.
Let's talk about gender bias a little bit, because there are things which, when I think of, makes my blood boil. What are those things that you think that you have seen, which you say, no, this got to change?
So there are many things, and Aditi, this is one thing which so much of it gets has normalized, and I'll give you one very simple example. So my daughter now lives in Canada. She lives in Toronto. Just started working from the month of May last year. So she did her undergrad there. And, earlier, she would walk out and we would all wear what we normally wear, kids, wearing shorts, and walked out. And she said, now I find this very hard. And I said, what do you find hard? He said, earlier when you would walk out in a pair of shorts and people stared, somehow it was normal. You were used to that. Now that I've lived abroad and I'm not used to that, and I do it and I find people's eyes on me, I find it uncomfortable. And I'm just giving you this example to actually share also how much things normalize with us. For instance, if I now look back, there have been instances when there were even within in a client's office or in the organizations that I've been, somebody has said something sexist, and I think in some instances I have shrugged my shoulders. Right? Today, I would call it out.
You want to give an example of this?
I would remember one thing which had happened not once but a few times. So I'm the head of the business. So I've got people under me who could be men, right? And most of them are. Right? And typically, people who are taking financial decisions. So it's a guy who's sitting in front. And so he's asking a question. I'm the person who's the head of the business, sitting in the middle, 2 people behind me. I'm answering the question. He asks the next question. It's either directed this side or that side. I mean, I've been in situations where there has been zero eye contact with me through the entire.
Like you don't exist.
I don't exist.
It's
in some instances, it's been sort of with difficulty. If she's answering, I have to look at her. In the couple where there have been, which I still remember, where there has been zero eye contact, I said, it's just amazing because you actually are. I mean, can you imagine? I'm having a conversation with you, right? But you're constantly looking at him.
Yeah.
It's unnerving almost, right?
Yeah, very disrespectful as well.
It's very disrespectful as well.
But that's the way it is.
Yeah.
So is it because women are typically not associated with finance as a subject? Because, evolutionary science says that, women are nurturers and stay at home and take care of the kids, and the man goes out and hunts and gathers and blah, blah, blah. Do you think it is still, it still trickles down to this age?
Oh, 100%. 100%. There's a knock. So this whole thing about, it's very interesting that because people don't associate a money management role with a woman. There's a very strong occupational bias.
Yeah.
So you'll find, even if you look at, not just anecdotally, but if I can't quote you studies, but there are enough empirical studies which are, if you see the human resources function, the support functions are typically
women.
More females, even in that, 30-40% is now increasing over a period of time of women working. They are in those functions, but not in the decisive roles, right? Not in the role of a business head, a CEO, or even a sales head, which are the more, right? So in one of the boards which I'm on, where the number is very small and they're trying to up it from something like 8-9 to about 12-13. And I said, look, On the other hand, there is one where it used to be 10 or 12 and has gone up to 41.8.
Oh.
And including very significant business roles which I headed. So I use that example to share with this company to say that, and the typical examples come up, these are the kind of jobs where they don't like coming. And I said, these are so much of cobwebs in our head because the moment they see one or two leaders in this so-called space where you think women are not comfortable, the moment you see them, this generation who are entering work, they are ambitious, right?
Yeah.
But they'd like to enter a space where they can see another woman at the top, right?
True.
Because they then know I have a career path to go there.
Yeah.
If they don't, if they see largely only men there and they see only a support role there, you would naturally think I can do well only if I go that route.
Yeah.
So why would I go this route? And a lot of women also possibly getting married much later in life, though they want to achieve. And that's actually a very important dynamic, because once you've achieved and you know that what achievement means, even if somebody were to take a break for 8 months or 9 months, and in today's environment, there's a lot of encouragement to come back, and maybe you need that short break. Or though I am a full believer in parental leave rather than even this whole extended maternity leave and all of that, because I think it backfires against women, and I've spoken about that actively. But I think what happens is if they've tasted success, then you've seen life beyond the initial years of work where you're still sort of working hard to achieve a certain level, and then you're working hard to raise a family, right? But if you've tasted success, you want to have both. Because I remember when I had when I had Dia, by Indian standards, it was late. I was 37, okay, when I delivered her. But I had already led a consumer bank. I was the head of the consumer bank. I took that break, and I knew, even though I had her at a time when I wanted to have a child, it was, by the way, for the mistaken notion that I thought that, I've had different kinds of experiences. This is another experience. And that would be also fun to have. I keep using the word. I mean, it is so much more than that. And I needed to have had a child to discover it. But to me, it was very clear that, I actually used to think at that time, how could women just think of giving up what they had and just concentrating on this? I mean, to me, the question didn't arise. I needed both. And so I'm going to be there, but I can't imagine 24 hours only with a child. And let's, the point I'm making to you is, to me, I was very clear that this only can't be life.
A lot of times what happens is society or people around you impose this mother's guilt on you. And see, you had your child when you were 37, but for a young mother, it can affect the mental health.
Completely.
Right?
Completely. I can talk to you about, I remember one of my clients, and, when I would come to their office, they all, and, these were some of the diamond merchants in ABN AMRO who were some of my clients. But they're very traditional, right? But there was one who would actually have his daughter be in office, one of the exceptions. And I said, but I don't see her. He said, no, but you came for her wedding and now, she's had a kid. I said, oh, so, but the kid is now what? So it's 6 months. He said, yeah, but she stopped coming. I said, oh, but why? So he said, yeah, but once you have a child, basically what he was trying to tell me, the whole experience is so satisfying. Why would anybody want to leave the kid and step out? And I was like, I didn't want to have that.
You didn't know what to say.
You also contradict and get into this long history of how I completely think the opposite. And but you're absolutely right. There is this whole feeling that a woman who has given birth
supposed to feel.
Is supposed to feel,
right?
So much motherly instinct, care, and her everything is to be subsumed within the child. And that is so deeply satisfying that you don't want anything else.
Yeah.
You're right. There is guilt. There are a whole bunch of other things.
And imposed guilt.
Guilt.
The poor woman might not feel like that. She might want to balance both, right?
Absolutely.
Being a fabulous mother and yet being successful in the career.
Absolutely.
But I have seen that so many times.
Absolutely. And also, what does a fabulous mother mean? I mean, things are there. There is, you would expect both parents to be there, giving and taking. Sure, there could be circumstances which don't allow that. In which case, but this whole thing that everybody feels a certain way or every woman feels a certain way, I'm all for informed choices. A woman who makes this choice.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's absolutely fine.
Yeah, and who's also been, say, very successful and now wants a break.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And wants to do that.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
But the whole point is to generalize
Yeah.
and say that somebody who did not feel that is really weird, right?
Yeah.
Because all women feel that. That
Yeah.
is strange.
No, and the other funny thing which I have heard in my life is, her husband makes so much money. Why does she need to work?
Yeah.
I'm like, what is the connection? Again, that's a relationship with
Absolutely.
money. That is a relationship that,
Absolutely.
or gender bias,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
Where money is concerned, the relationship with money, in your experience, how have you seen people navigate through the relationship with money? For
Yeah.
example, a rich person, a wealthy person, how is his relationship with money different from, say, an upper middle class, and, lower?
So it's again a very interesting question. So if you look at a really rich person's relationship with money, now it's difficult to generalize, and this is anecdotal
course,
evidence
of
and my
course.
own experience, right? But I have seen a lot of people to be extremely stressed by it.
Mm.
By stress, I mean,
Mm.
obviously the wealth has to be divided in different pockets, right? So
Correct.
these are people who will have multiple properties in multiple places, etc., etc. And I have actually, in my experience, found a lot of them to be extremely stressed about what is happening where. So there's this whole thing of, I don't know this has gotten sorted, but now look at this, right? What do I do about this aspect? So there's always, and you can literally see those worry lines. So they're not remotely stress-free. So the whole idea is that if you have wealth of a certain amount, you should be able to lead
A freer life.
a more liberated life, right? And now there's empirical evidence which says that unless you have your concept of enough in the West, I think they've got it at 100,000 or whatever. I mean, with inflation, etc., those may change. But it was not a lot of money. It's basically something that you think is enough, and after that,
Roti kapda makan.
a little
And maybe
probably
a
more
cake.
than that. And then, then you start to value experiences because you have the luxury of time to value experiences. So there are these people who are constantly, because their adrenaline comes from earning more money and what to do with it. And to be seen, if you've already reached here, can I be at par with so-and-so? So there is some degree of both recognition, power, and money all play. I've seen a lot of people quite stressed about how to manage the different pockets in which their money is lying. And there's a lot of time which is spent on that. And there is one category who've kind of, are driven by how much they have and how much more they can have. And that's their primary driver. So they're happy that they've made so much, but they're also extremely careful that it needs to be preserved in a certain manner. And a lot of their time, effort, energy goes into not living life, but into just managing money. On focusing that. Then there are a few others who found, who think, and these are relatively younger people who, during the time I was doing money management was also the time when IT companies had, unlike a lot of the other startups today, the bigger IT companies, the Infosys of the world had a lot of stock options, and people who also went in at the right time got those options and became. And I still remember one person who's saying, I just want this pool of money, which I almost think I'm just very lucky to have got, to be just managed well. So don't take too much risks with it. Just manage it well. It just allows me to do other things. And he liked making furniture with his own hands.
Wow.
Yeah. So there was, so I actually saw, it's like, here is a person who's self-actualized, but I remember that because it was so rare. So the bulk of them had this relationship which was very close. I have earned it. It needs to be preserved. And there's a lot of worry that it is not being preserved because it's been given to different people or it's not being handled well. So a lot of stress related to that. And I've also seen the other part where it is families where, almost sort of breakups within families, people, siblings not speaking to each other because of money related issues. So I've seen that whole, this is one of my lectures to my daughter is, thank God, you're not in a rich family, because these are some of the things which I have seen, it doesn't make you happy. So certainly there was no correlation to happiness there in that relationship. On the other hand, when it comes to the upper middle class, and these are the only two, upper middle, where I belong, these are the only two areas where I have seen. And I've seen, if I call it poor, I will talk about the staff who kind of work in our homes, how they look at money. And there is very crystal clear. Obviously, they need more. Because, one
Things
illness,
are,
they still don't have medical insurance. So one illness and they're whatever. The upper middle is again in a very strange, because these are the people, who are my colleagues, etc. Where there is this whole, one is this whole thing of where you start to associate, which is one of the good things, which, because I don't have, it was easier for me to quit my job, etc. Where you are aspiring to be there, right? And hence, even though you may be earning at a particular level, you just need to acquire that bag or that car or go to this club or
the
have
materialism
this,
of it all.
and the external validation that comes with it. Because if I'm seen like that, then I am there, right? Or I'm sort of getting there. I've arrived. Yeah, exactly. So there is that. Very few who are outside of that, but they exist, where they have interests which go beyond, and they're kind of fulfilled in themselves. So it's sort of heterogeneous kind of mix, but those are the two overriding relationships that I've seen. So among the rich, a little bit too much stickiness to that money, and a few who are bereft of that. In the upper middle class, this whole thing of aspiring to be there is the much larger percentage. And there's some who are like, happy to have had what we have, and let's enjoy our lives and do what we can with it.
One last question. When you see young women entering workspace and looking towards, being a leader at some point, what do you think they should learn from you? And what do you think they should refuse to inherit?
So, one of the things which is to me today, and I can see myself also from a distance, the person I was then, the person I am now, and I wish somebody had actually told me that, is you need to think of life as having this one life which needs to be lived in its fullest form. So don't let any one thing subsume your identity, right? Life cannot be only my work and how well I do in it. It cannot be, after a point of time, only my work and my family and how much time I be able to give to both. It has to have other things, right? And, you may not go the extent that I go, where it is literature, art, architecture, films, theater, music, and all of these things which I'm literally grappling with. But you need to do what is fun for you, right?
Your
and you
hobby.
need to have those, for me, I call them consuming interests because they consume me. A really good film or a really good book is as important as my work as anything else, because it takes me out of my bearings and takes me into a different world which I explore, and then I can come back to this world. So it's like a very safe form of inhabiting many different worlds. And I think it's a very interesting part of life, which if you don't explore, a lot of people say, but reading is not for me, or this is not for me, or, we need something light. And what you always talk about is quite heavy. I said heavy sure, everybody, to each their own. But the point is, unless you've explored something, how do you know whether you like it or not? So one is to go back to your question, if they're embarking on a career, to understand this is an important part of life. If you enter something, my whole thing is whatever I do, I need to be able to like it, because only then will I make time. And, if you're passionate by nature, you need to do what you like, because then you'll do it well, right? So that's one. But not let your identity completely be subsumed in what you're doing, because I've also learned that a lot of life is not what you plan for, but things happen.
Of course.
It's random. Luck and chance play a huge role. It's how you react to those. And the ability to react, again, people use it as a buzzword, resilience. But what resilience to me really means is you will fall. But the point is, that's not the end of it. You pick yourself up.
You bounce back.
You have to pick yourself up. And you will have the ability to pick yourself up only if everything is not in one bucket, which means this career I've put everything in.
All eggs in one
unfair
basket.
things happen, right? The world is not fair, right? Something crazy will happen, which is not linked to how good you are in your job. And if that happens, you need to pick yourself up and move on. So you need to have friends, you need to have people, you need to have passions, you need to have a bunch of things in your life. So if this doesn't work, you pick yourself up and you do something. But all of these other things keep you grounded. So that's, to me, I guess, the most critical thing. And the other thing is curiosity. Today I have, my boards are each different from the other. And, there was one sector which was not there, which has now luckily come, because, 10 years is when you finish 2 terms in a board and you move off. You have to move off mandatorily as per law and move into another. And it is just this whole, enormous, almost humongous curiosity about learning. What you don't know yet. And then because you need to know a context to be able to also sort of understand and provide value in. So I tell a lot of people also who are aspiring board leaders, I said, it depends on this one factor, which is curiosity. Because I am humongously curious about all things, to be honest, about a lot of things.
About life. And all that is there in life.
And there are things which link up, which you don't think. And I'm not looking for linkages.
Yeah.
But it does. It happens. And it's just, it makes life just more interesting.
Exactly.
So I think it's to not take yourself too seriously. That would be the last point that I would leave with. Get a perspective. There are bigger things than you in life.
Yeah.
So all of the stuff that we do are our little adventures.
Yeah.
As long as we kind of understand, I think
we'll be fine. You'll be fine.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you so much for coming and sharing your thoughts. And I wish you all the very best with the book.